Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive right into the incredibly chaotic and, frankly, bizarre start of the First World War, a conflict that pretty much everyone thought was going to be over by Christmas. All right, let's just start with this. This is what Germany's emperor, the Kaiser, told his troops as they were marching off to war in August 1914. I mean, you can just feel the confidence, right? This vision of a quick, clean, victorious little war. Wow. Were they ever wrong? I mean, so profoundly wrong. The leaves fell that year, and then they fell again, and again, and again. Those soldiers, they weren't coming home, and all that shining optimism was about to slam headfirst into a brick wall of brutal industrial warfare. So how did this whole mess get started? Well, it kicked off with just 3 gunshots on a street in Sarajevo, and that one single event was enough to drag all the big players in Europe. We're talking Britain, France, Russia, Germany, Austria-Hungary, into a massive fight. They pretty much immediately picked teams. You had the Allies on one side and the Central Powers on the other. But, in the middle of all this deadly, serious conflict, one country's involvement added this almost absurd, comical twist to everything. We're talking about the ultimate wild card in this whole war, Italy. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because you got to understand the culture at the time. For a lot of Italians, life was all about the good stuff. Passion, art, food. War? Yeah, that wasn't exactly at the top of their list of favorite national pastimes. And well, that was going to have some predictable consequences out on the battlefield. I mean, Italy already had a bit of a reputation. They called them the pauper imperialist, and their military track record was, let's just say, not great. In 1896, you had 17,000 Italian soldiers get completely routed by Ethiopian warriors armed with spears. A few years after that, 6 of their modern, state-of-the-art warships got scared off by a handful of old Chinese boats. It's not a great look. Which brings us to one of the most unbelievable stories of the entire war. A tiny force of just 150 German and Austrian soldiers charges at an Italian position. The result? 9,000 Italian soldiers happily throw down their weapons and just surrender on the spot. And they weren't just compliant, they were reportedly thrilled about it. You could almost hear them saying, "Hey, as long as you don't make me fight, I'll do literally anything." And it gets even crazier. They actually started helping their captors, showing them the best routes to go attack their own former allies. It was pure, beautiful chaos. Okay, so while Italy is bringing this element of the surreal to the war, Germany is operating on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. They're all about pure, calculated, meticulous logic. They had a master plan, and they were absolutely convinced it was foolproof. It was called the Schlieffen Plan. See, Germany's big problem was that it was stuck in the middle, with enemies on both sides, France to the west, Russia to the east. A two-front war is a nightmare for any military. So the whole point, the absolute key, was to knock one of them out fast before the other one was even ready to fight. Think of it like a 1-2 knockout punch, all built on a super precise timetable. Step 1, swing a massive army through neutral Belgium, completely avoiding France's main defenses to surround and crush Paris within 6 weeks. Step 2, with France knocked out, use Germany's incredibly efficient railway system to shuttle the entire army to the east and then deal with the slow-to-mobilize Russians. The whole thing was planned down to the minute. The guy who designed this whole thing, Count von Schlieffen, was totally obsessed with it. So obsessed that apparently his very last words on his deathbed were a warning to his successor. Be sure to keep the right wing strong. That huge hammer swing through Belgium, that was the whole ballgame. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? This is where a perfect logical plan meets messy, imperfect human nature. The new commander, General von Malte, he started to get nervous. He was worried an attack in the east could threaten his family's estate, so what did he do? He started pulling divisions away from that all-important right wing. The hammer was weakened before it even got a chance to swing. And as that German war machine started to roll forward, it was about to run into some variables that no timetable could ever predict. And the very first one was the sheer, stubborn courage of a nation they just saw as a little speed bump. Let me just put this into perspective for you. The entire Belgian army, it was made up of just 4 divisions. That's it. The Germans figured, hey, they'll see us coming and they'll just step aside.
Because the force coming at them was 72 German divisions. I mean, this is the definition of David versus Goliath. And everybody, especially the Germans, expected Goliath to win this thing in a matter of hours.
But the Belgians fought back. They fought with everything they had. A small but tough-as-nails fortress at Liège just refused to surrender. It held up the entire German advance for 12 agonizing days. And in doing so, it completely shredded the Schlieffen Plan's perfect timetable.
And just to give you an idea of how fierce this resistance was, the Germans had to bring in their biggest siege guns. We're talking cannons so massive, they fired shells that weighed over a ton each, 1.15 tons, just to blast that fortress into rubble.
Those 12 days, though, they were an absolute gift to the Allies. It gave France and Britain the precious time they needed to mobilize. And so, as that weakened German army finally got close to Paris, the French were able to stage a desperate last-ditch counterattack that would go down in history as the Miracle of the Marne.
So how did they get their soldiers to the front line in time? In a moment of just incredible on-the-fly improvisation, the French military commandeered every single taxi in Paris. A fleet of 2,000 cabs started ferrying soldiers directly from the city streets into the battle.
And just like that, in a moment of total crisis, using everyday civilian technology, the world's first motorized infantry was born. The rigid German plan, built on cold calculation, was being undone by creativity and sheer desperation. They won the battle. Paris was saved. The Schlieffen Plan had failed. The war of movement was over. That promise of being home before the leaves fell was now just a bitter memory. A new and far more terrible phase of the war was about to begin. Because they couldn't advance, both sides just dug in. They dug this vast, complex network of trenches that would eventually stretch for 700 kilometers, from the Swiss border all the way to the North Sea. The war of quick movement was replaced by a war of attrition. For the next 4 years, progress wasn't going to be measured in miles, but in meters, and it would be paid for with millions of lives. The quick, decisive war was a total fantasy. The reality was a brutal, horrific stalemate. So the question became, when the land itself turns into one giant graveyard, where else can the killing possibly go?